Hello, everyone. Today we are here in the weekly live that happens every Tuesday at 10 p.m. London time. And today we're going to be talking about behavior interview for mid-level and senior Java developers. So this interview is very important because according to your behavior, you're going to perform better at work. So in short, you need to have the growth mindset. So when you're doing an interview, you have to show the interviewer that you're someone who is coachable, you're someone who is reliable, you're someone with integrity, you're someone who takes ownership, who takes initiative, and get things done when it's necessary. So those are some of the fundamentals to do well in a behavior interview. And to be good on those interviews, think of the questions ahead of time. So that you write them down, you write those questions down, you structure your answer, and then you practice answering those questions to a friend or to someone who can help you on that. Because only writing down your answers is not enough. Also, to deliver this answer in a way that you show that, good communication, good leadership skills, adaptability and learning, conflict handling, problem solving, and ownership. So I'm going to go through some general questions that they ask during those interviews so that you're better prepared when you have a behavior interview. Usually the behavior interview is the last one. After, you're going to have, most companies, you're going to have technical interview, and it starts with an algorithm interview. Then it goes to a system design interview, and then the behavior interview. So usually that's what happens. But let's explore each of those points here so that you know what to expect in a behavior interview. I also have here some real-world behavior interview questions, and I'm going to share those questions with you at the end of this live, okay? So let's start here with teamwork and collaboration. So you need to show that you are a person who is easy to work with other people, right? So you need to show the interviewer that you are someone who collaborates, you are someone who doesn't let your ego own your way. You are a developer who will do your best for the team success. So let's see some points here about cross-functional collaboration. So for example, how would you work with QA, DevOps, product managers? So let's see the example with QA, because that's the most common kind of situation we go through. And we can use the STAR method, which is situation, task, action, and result, right? It's kind of a structured way for doing storytelling, right? So let's continue. So the situation is that the team released a new microservice for handling payments, and QA was reporting frequent test failures. Then the task is that you needed to collaborate with QA to identify whether the failures were due to code defects, flaky tests, or environment issues, right? And your action was that you paired with a QA engineer to reproduce the issue locally, and then you added additional logging around API responses. And then you suggested to add contract tests to validate requests and response formats in the APIs. And the result is that you discovered the failures were due to inconsistent error handling. After fixing the code and adding contract tests, the failure rate dropped to near zero, and QA reported much smoother regression cycles. So this is one example of story, and obviously you need to analyze your own situation, and you can use this STAR framework: situation, task, action, and result. And you're going to do good. You don't need to tell crazy story. You just need to put the details that will show that basically you are an easy person to work with. And I won't go through all the examples because you understood the idea, and we just basically implement the same structure to give your answer. And remember, it's your story. It's not a made out story. It's something you went through where you show the traits that you will be collaborating with your team and you're going to be an easy person to work with. So another question they will ask you is about handling conflicting priorities. So one example, so let's see another example using the STAR method. So you could say that you are working on a Java backend service where you are assigned to implement a new feature requested by the product manager. At the same time, a critical production bug was reported that caused intermittent failures in order processing. Both tasks were urgent, but required significant time and focus. And the task is that you needed to balance delivering the new feature on schedule while also ensuring the production issue was resolved quickly without compromising quality. Then you immediately communicated with your manager and the product manager to clarify the business impact of each task. And then you decided that the production bug had higher priority because it directly affected customer. And then you quickly created a short-term fix, hot patch, and worked with QA to validate it. In the meantime, you documented the root cause and scheduled a more permanent solution. Once the production system was stable, you resumed work on the feature, and to recover lost time, you paired with another developer to speed up implementation. And the result was that the production issue was resolved within hours, minimizing customer impact. The product manager appreciated the transparency and prioritization, and the feature was delivered with only a minor delay, which was acceptable given the circumstances. This incident reinforced the importance of clear communication and collaborative prioritization. Yes, when facing conflicting demands. So basically here, you told a story where you could be collaborative and you could understand the context of the situation. So obviously, if you have a production error, like obviously the priority is a production bug because that is affecting directly the customers, right? So this has higher priority. And, giving this context and telling a story where you could solve both problems, like you could solve the production bug and you could also deliver your story with a smart solution, that shows a lot about your sense of ownership and your problem-solving skills. Like it's the ability of analyzing the context of the situation and coming up with a solution that is necessary for the project. Because if you're dealing directly with your customer, you need to make sure that your customer is using the software smoothly. So a production bug is definitely higher priority than what you would have in a normal task. So basically, for those interviews, you're going to emphasize how you made the people you communicated with, how you balanced trade-offs, and what the outcome was. Okay, so let's continue. And regarding code reviews, so basically, you need to give constructive feedback. Like I've seen some code reviews that really sucked. Like I've seen people saying, "Oh, this code sucks," like in a very rude way. So instead of being rude in code reviews, it's better to give constructive feedback. So if, for example, you see a chance of improvement, just tell them, say, "Hey, like this code here could be improved with this design pattern, or this code could be improved with this Java feature." So by doing that, you give constructive feedback, the other person learns from you, and the other person also respects you, rather than being rude in the code review. And as a senior developer, it's also very important that you mentor other developers. So, for example, guiding junior developers and peers. That is really good because you basically become a knowledge multiplier, and you also get better at sharing your knowledge. And the interviewer will appreciate if you have the skill of sharing your knowledge and mentoring other developers, because in most companies, there will be junior, there will be less experienced developers than you, and then you can help them to grow. And okay, so this is teamwork and collaboration. The other point that's very important is problem solving and ownership. So they'll ask you about debugging strategies, and it's crucial that you tell a story to the interviewer in a way that you show the interviewer that you know how to solve the root cause of the problem. Because if you solve the bug in a shallow way, it doesn't matter too much, because probably the bug will go back like in a short time. But if you show the interviewer that you know how to analyze the problem, you know how to go through the logs, you know how to talk to key people to figure out what's going on, you're going to find out what happened, right? And so they might ask about system failures or incidents as well. And so they want to know if you know how to handle production outages, and if you know how to communicate during a tough time, like if you know how to communicate during crisis. So it could be that there was an issue in production and the customers are complaining, your manager is putting a lot of pressure on you, and it could be that you needed to communicate everyone in your team that they need to basically work overtime. And this is not very good because some people will have plans already, but anyway. And it's important also to have the ownership mindset. And what is that? So you need to tell a story where you take a problem from the beginning and you finish it. Basically, you take a story from the beginning and you're going to deliver it in the end. So it's important that you have this ownership mindset so that you begin the task and you finish the task yourself. Well, it doesn't mean that that you need to finish the task on your own. You can have help as well, but you have to have this mindset that you're going to be the owner of the story. You're going to be the owner of the task, and you are responsible for delivering it. If you need help from specific area, for example, from DevOps or from QA, you're going to talk to them to request help, but you, in the end, are responsible to deliver the story. So you have to keep that in mind, and you need to also follow through on deliverables. So like for example, if you have a story and you are dragging the story on many sprints, that will look bad on you. So you need to show in the interview that you are able to communicate clearly what you've been doing, and basically that you're going to be able to deliver your story. You're going to be able to deliver your task. Okay, so basically this is about problem solving and ownership. Number 3 is about communication. So you need to be able to handle technical discussions, explaining design, trade-offs. So this is very common when we are working with microservices, and we need to prepare like kind of a meeting with everyone. And then you have to explain, okay, those are the pros and those are the cons. And, telling a story to the interviewer will definitely help you a lot, so that what's the trade-off, right? So if you choose, for example, if you say, we need to use Kafka, you're going to have to say what's the trade-off between a simple queue or using Kafka. So you need to explain that. So you're going to have to present alternatives to stakeholders, right? And basically, during the behavior interview, you're going to have to tell stories that show the interviewer that you are able to handle those meetings. So they might ask you, but what happens if someone disagrees with you? So, and then you're going to have to explain, okay, so in this meeting I did, that the other developer disagreed with me, but then I explained the pros and the cons. I heard his opinion, And, basically you're going to have to explain how you can handle different opinions from yours and how you can reach to consensus with your team. That's very important, right? Because you're going to be working on a team, right? And regarding non-technical communication, you're going to be explaining technical issues to non-engineers. And you're going to be also managing stakeholder expectations. So basically, when you communicate with non-engineers, you can't use technical jargons. Because the thing is that if you use technical jargons with non-engineers, they will be defensive because they won't understand what you're saying. So when you're explaining technical issues to non-engineers, you need to show in the interview that you know how to communicate with non-technical people. So show them, tell the details when you communicate with non-engineers. Tell the details that you understand they don't know about Java frameworks, they don't know a lot about testing, they don't know about the technical world. So you need to use non-technical words with them. So if you tell a story, explain those details that you know how to communicate with them, that will definitely count as a plus for you. Regarding remote and distributed collaboration, it's important that you have clear asynchronous communication. So, for example, sometimes you don't need to create a whole meeting to discuss something that you could do by email or by a message, right? So explaining those things that you know how to handle a situation according to the context, it counts extra points for you because then the interviewer know that you won't waste time from other people, right? So tell the story, like every question from those behavior interviews, you need to show the interviewer that you are an effective developer, that you are highly skilled, that you have the growth mindset, you are humble to take feedback, you are coachable, you are a developer who wants to grow, who wants to get better, you are a developer who is consistent on your learning, because they will ask you how you get up to date with technologies, and you have to have the answer right away. You have to say, hey, I've been doing this work, I've been studying, I've been doing mentorships, I've been doing, I don't know, anything that you're doing to evolve in your career. This will definitely count points in your favor, right? Basically, they want to know that you are someone who is easy to work with, someone who is not arrogant. Have you ever worked with someone who is arrogant? It's horrible. Like those people, they become very toxic, right? They start being rude with everyone else. So like you can't come across as an arrogant person during the interview. So you have to be careful with that. For example, being able to receive feedback and being able to give feedback, those are important skills, and they might ask you something in that sense. So the other point that is important during those interviews is leadership and initiative. And this has obviously more weight for senior developers, because the more senior you get, the more is expected for you for leadership and initiative skills. So let's see here some of the questions they might ask you. They might ask you questions about decision making. So you might have to make a choice regarding frameworks, libraries, or design patterns. And sometimes you need to think about the short-term and the long-term solutions. For example, if you have many business solutions to deliver right now, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to work on technical debt. So basically, you're going to have to balance. You're going to have to negotiate with the management, and you have to show those abilities during the interview, right? You're going to have to show to the interviewer that you're not someone, you have to do the full refactor in the code, otherwise, but it's all wrong. No, you have to show that, you negotiate. You are a developer who wants to find the middle ground. You don't want to say, this is my idea and it is final. Like, it doesn't work like that. So you're going to have to basically balance so basically you're going to have to negotiate, right? You're going to have to negotiate with your manager on working on technical debt. So if you have to deliver lots of business stories, you need to do that. Otherwise, the company might not survive, right? But at the same time, you can negotiate a long-term goal, long-term solution, say, hey, manager, we need also to work on technical debt. Can we plan? Can we allocate some complex points for technical debt in the next quarter? It's just a matter of negotiating, right? It's not like we have to find a middle ground. Like it's not, you have to think like about the big picture of the company, right? Like technical debt don't solve the company's problems, right? So it helps a lot for sure, but it's not the thing that will bring money to the company. So you need to negotiate, say, hey, okay, we can postpone a bit of technical debt, but you need also to, make it very clear to the manager that this is important. Understand, okay, unfortunately, we can't do it now. We can't do the code refactoring right now, but, the next quarter, we have to do it. So, like, basically, you need to tell the story in a way that you show the interviewer that you're going to negotiate. You're going to say, hey, okay, let's find this middle ground here. Process improvements. And this is very good for leadership and senior developer roles. So basically, you need to show the management that you are able to see problems and suggest a solution, right? So if you're able to tell a story to management, to the interviewer, that you could understand a problem, for example, in the workflow, in the CI/CD process, and then you suggested technology to solve the issue, that will also count as favorable to you. And if you have a story where you could drive adoption of best coding practices, that's also very good. So I'm pretty sure that you have some kind of story during your career where you could show this kind of leadership. And, like I said, you need to write down questions regarding those points here, and you need to practice. You need to answer them by talking, because how you deliver the stories is very important. It's key to passing the interview. And regarding leading project, so basically you're going to have to coordinate. So you're going to have to tell a story where you are able to coordinate efforts across teams. And if you weren't exactly a team lead, it's totally fine. You don't need to have necessarily the title of a senior or a tech lead, but I'm pretty sure that in your career, you had a situation where you had to lead some kind of situation, right? And if you tell a story where you basically coordinated the effort of a team to solve a problem, that's enough. They are not looking for a perfect answer. They are just looking on your behavior on those situations. And, sometimes you're going to have to handle conflicts. And basically, my recommendation is that you tell a story that happened to you, but always put you in a good light, right? Tell the story in a way that it will benefit you, right? So basically, when you're telling the story, you can't be a victim. That's pretty bad. Like if you say, oh, I was the victim, the other person was wrong. Yeah, sometimes the other person will be wrong, but always put the story in a way that, you had the leadership to handle the situation. So, for example, you could tell a story where you had a conflict and, instead of telling the person off during the meeting, you could say, hey, like to handle this conflict, I called this person to a one-on-one meeting. And I faced the person right away and I said, okay, what you said during this meeting, I didn't like it. And then you're very direct with the person. And, that shows maturity. And that shows that you can handle a conflicting situation, right? So tell a story in a way that you show leadership, initiative, and you deal with the situation in a mature way. And the other element is adaptability and learning. And this is very important. They will ask you, oh, how do you get up to date with technologies, right? So let's go through some of the important points. handling changing requirements, adjusting to scope changes, prioritization strategies. So, and this is very common in Agile, right? Sometimes like they will say, hey, we have lots of bugs in production. You can't work on your stories. And then you have to tell the interviewer in a way that you are like kind of flexible, but not too flexible as well. So sometimes you need to say no if other stakeholders from the project, if they give you a crazy deadline with impossible projects to deliver, you have to tell a story where you show some boundaries, but also you have to tell the story in a way that you are thinking about the big picture of the company. You're thinking about the good of the project, right? You can't tell the story in a way that you would say no, but you would forget about the company's success. Because your priority when you're joining a company is not about you, about your team. It's about the company's success. So, and obviously, like, okay, you have to have some balance because you also don't want your team to be working too much overtime, or you don't want your team to not deliver what was promised. So there has to be a negotiation. Again, negotiation, right? Because you might say, okay, if this is priority, we have to remove some of the stories we agreed. Is that okay? So you need to always work to the middle ground solution because, you know, in companies, it's not straightforward. Sometimes you're going to have to change scopes. Sometimes new priorities will come up. It is bad to happen. Yes, we hate it. I hated when like you had to change all the priorities and, you know, change everything all of a sudden. This is horrible. It affects the team morale, right? Because, you know, are delivering everything, but then everything changes and then you have to do things that are completely different. It affects the team morale because you're not able to deliver what you promised. So this is bad. So you need to tell the story in a way that you prioritize the company's success, but you also pay attention on how is the team dealing with that, if they are too annoyed, if they are getting demotivated. So basically like kind of a leadership view and mentality. About continuous learning, you need to tell stories where, you know, how can you keep up to date with the latest Java features, JVM improvements, or if you explored technologies with Spring, microservices, cloud platforms, AI. So basically, you need to tell them a story where you show clearly that you are getting up to date. And this is pretty common. Like the more senior we get, we need to deal with ambiguity, right? And this is very common. So like we have that kind of in the day-to-day, right? We get stories that are not very well written. And like most of our jobs as software engineers is to do that, is to get stories that we don't have the full information. We know what we need to do, but we don't have the full information. We need to ask questions. We need to look for the team where we can get the answer. We need to research about technologies we can use to solve the problem. We need to talk with key people to solve this problem. So this is pretty common in our world nowadays, in the software industry. So, and basically when you are in the behavior interview, you need to show them that you know how to solve those incomplete stories, right? Maybe you can talk with the business analyst who wrote the story and you can get more information. And probably the business analyst will give you some point of contact and you can have probably some quick meetings with those people, collect as much information as you can so that you're prepared to solve the problem. So basically here you have to show that you're able to adapt and, you know, keep learning because, you know, like getting new tasks, new stories in the middle of a sprint is a way to adapt, right? So, and in companies, this is very common. And number 6 about conflict and challenges. So you might have to tell a story where you had disagreement on architecture or design, different code styles or approaches. So it's very common to have some discussions and conflicts about that. And sometimes you might use design pattern, but people might disagree with you because it's not the project convention. And they might say, oh, no, but we don't use design patterns here or whatever. So basically, you're going to have to tell the story in a way that you could deal with disagreement gracefully, in a way that you won't disrespect the other person. And a lot in our profession is about negotiating deadlines. And if you don't negotiate deadlines correctly, you might not be able to deliver whatever negotiated. And you have to also manage unrealistic expectations. For example, if the manager is expecting that you're going to deliver a whole project in 1 month, that won't happen, right? So basically, you're going to have to tell a story where you're able to negotiate and, maybe sometimes saying no. So tell a story where you say no, but you also, basically, your ultimate goal in the company is to prioritize the company's success. So if you're able to convey that in your story, you're fine. And also being able to negotiate with your manager, that's very important, because usually who is doing the behavior interview is a manager. And the manager obviously wants you to work with them in a way that you're going to contribute to the company's success. So basically, you need to show in the story that you are fine with your previous managers. You could respect them, you could understand their context. So basically, you have to show in the story that you have empathy. You are able to listen to their situation and to work with the manager, right? And regarding personal challenges, so they might ask you, oh, how do you deal with stress and burnout? And then you can tell something personal from you. How do you deal with that? Or how do you balance multiple priorities, right? So these pillars are very important, conflict and challenges. They will ask you about conflict and challenges. And number 7, so let's see here, put here. So on number 7, let's continue. So basically, you're going to have to tell a story where you meet deadlines. Let me just organize here information. So you're going to have to tell a story where you used time management techniques. And one time management technique could be the Moscow method, and which means must have, should have, could have, and won't have. So it's basically the Eisenhower matrix. And one example could be, when balancing a production bug and a new feature, I prioritize based on customer impact, then communicate trade-offs clearly to stakeholders. And you have to have the skill of breaking down work. As a senior developer, mainly, you need to have these skills. So you need to know how to split big features into smaller deliverables, because, that will help you track progress and that will help you communicate what you are doing. Whereas if you have a big story and you don't know the complex points, then your manager will think that you're doing nothing. So having the skill of breaking down a story and, giving them reasonable complex points will definitely help you to gain visibility and to also communicate clearly how productive you are. So basically, in the interview, you have to tell a story where you were able to break down a huge story into smaller ones so that you could deliver them and you could also communicate clearly what you were doing. And regarding time boxing and focus work, I like to use Pomodoro. So I highly recommend everyone to also use Pomodoro, right? So this is something you can tell during the interview, and avoid changing tasks, right? Avoid context switching. So, and also turn off unnecessary notifications. So for example, if you are during a deep work session where you are coding and you need to solve very complex work, it's okay to, disable notification for maybe 1 hour, and then you can check if there is an important message. So by using Pomodoro, you can wait until the 5 minutes break, and then you can check if you have any important message. And you have to show a story. You have to tell a story where, you communicate things in a transparent way, right? If you notice that, I want to be able to deliver this story, you communicate ahead of time. You don't wait until the last day of the sprint to say, hey, by the way, I want to be able to deliver the story. That's really bad. And basically, they might ask you a story where you communicate that clearly. Say, hey, okay, I have a blocker here, and you flag that way before the sprint ends. Leveraging tools. Usually we see Jira in most companies. Trello. Yeah, sometimes. I never use Trello in a company, for example. Only my personal projects. And regular review and adjustment. So basically this is the famous retrospective meeting, right? And the tip here is that you basically show that you have time management techniques, but also highlight the outcome. Highlight that you are able to deliver complex projects, complex stories, and you are able to communicate deadlines to your manager. So basically you need to communicate that you are an effective developer. Regarding quality focus, you can tell some stories about tests, like how you could coverage your software quality with that, and also show that you are proactive on bug prevention. So you could tell a story where you talked with a QA engineer and you helped the QA engineer plan what test frameworks they would use. And, if you have any impactful story where you could reduce costs or you scaled systems, improved performance of a query, improved performance of an API, that's great. And you could also tell a story about contributions you did that increased team productivity. And again, those stories don't need to be perfect. You don't need to say that you are like Superman. You basically need to say that you need to convey that you have all of those points, right? You need to convey that you are an easy person to work with and you collaborate, you engage, you help the teams solve problems. You need to show that you have problem-solving skills, right? And basically, if you have a new problem, you are able to research, you are able to talk with the right person so that you collect information and you solve the problem. You own your story, which means that you take the story from the beginning and you deliver the story, right? Communication, how you communicate with non-technical people. So basically, you can't use technical jargons when talking with non-technical people. You have to show leadership and initiative. You don't wait for people to tell you what to do. You figure out what to do. You ask your team lead, you ask people, and you adapt and learn. You are a good negotiator. You're going to negotiate a middle ground solution. Regarding conflict and challenges, if someone messes up with you, so you have to tell the story, how you handle the situation in a mature way, or it could be even like a lightweight way to handle conflicts, like anything that will solve the problem, right? And you have to remember that you can't be that negative person. You can't be that person who is a victim and who will be complaining. Oh, imagine if you tell a story where you complain about your previous manager. That will sound really bad, because usually who does the behavior interview is a manager, or it could be even your manager. So if a manager is interviewing you and you're talking bad things about your previous manager, that's a huge red flag. You could be rejected right away. It's a huge red flag. It's a huge red flag if you are acting like a victim, if you're complaining about other developers. It's a huge red flag if you show arrogance and if you show that your ego is on the way. So there are things that are deal breakers during the behavior interview. So basically, you just need to make sure on those interviews that you're a mature developer who are able to deal with situations in in an assertive way, in a way that you handle the situation wisely. Like you don't act emotionally, right? Even if you feel angry, even if you feel like, frustrated, you're not reactive, you won't deal with a situation badly. So basically, they want someone who are nice, like someone who is nice to work with, someone who will take the team to success, right? Adaptability and learning. So you have to show that you're able to adapt and learn technologies. So basically, you can talk about your routine, what you've been doing consistently to improve on your skills, conflict and challenges, right? So all of those points are very important. And the general guidance is that, for intermediate developers, you should focus more on teamwork, problem solving, adaptability, and communication. Whereas for senior developers, you need to add emphasis on leadership, decision making, mentoring, and driving results, right? And I also have some real world questions Wellington kindly shared with me, and I'm gonna show you some of the real world questions Wellington had in his interview. And by the way, he passed an interview, which is amazing. So let's see here some of those questions. So yeah, let me see okay, it's 1 hour already. So let's see the real world questions then. Basically, those questions are about those points we just saw here. So let's see those questions. And obviously, it's impossible to go through all of them. So what I will do, I will read them for you, right? And if you stay until the end of this live, I will also share the mind map with you, right? So we are almost at the end anyway, so you're gonna get the mind map. So, okay, and I highly recommend you guys to write down those questions and write down the answer. But not only write down the answers, you have to practice. Find a friend, find a coworker, find a developer, whoever, and explain the answer, right? And so that you practice delivering the answer. It's not enough just to write it. You need to practice delivering it. So those questions are, tell me something interesting or unique about yourself. What kind of manager do you think would be a good match for you? What do you expect from a manager? Why should we hire you? And in this question, I highly recommend you to make a research about the company, understand the company's values, and then tailor your answer based on the company's values, right? Another question is, if we hire you, what would you bring to the company? What kind of value you would bring to the company? Then you can talk about your experience, and you need to understand what are their biggest challenges so that you tailor your answer to their problems. Remember, it's not about you, it's about the company, right? How could the company benefit from having you on the team? And then you talk about your strengths, right? And again, tailor the answer to what are the biggest company's problems. And they might ask you as well, what has been the biggest mistake you've made at work and what did you learn from it? Then it's fine, you can be honest here. You can tell your story, right? And just make sure that you tell the story in a way that shows humility, that shows ownership, that shows that you learn from your mistakes. Just make sure you tell the story in that way, right? And another question is, if I asked your manager or colleagues to describe you, what do you think they would say? So that's another tough question. And I'm pretty much sure that you have a nice friend from your previous jobs and they would say nice things about you, right? Obviously, there will be always people who won't like us, and that's fine. But obviously, talk about your best friend from your previous company. Tell the nice things that your best friend would say about you. Don't say the things that someone who doesn't like you would tell about you, right? So you have to be wise, basically, on those answers, right? And another question is, can you share a piece of negative feedback you received at work? How did you handle it or overcome it? So basically think about a negative feedback you received. And here you have to show that you are humble to receive feedback. because, that's a very important way to grow, right? Because we have blind spots. So there are many things we don't know that we should improve. And with the feedback, we know, okay, this is something I can do to improve. So basically, this question is key because if you show that you can take feedback, it basically shows that you are coachable. And the companies want developers who are coachable, who can grow. Whereas if you have a negative feedback and you handle that badly, and if you tell a story like that you tweet that in a bad way, it might backfire you. Obviously, there are exceptional situations where it could be that you took a feedback badly, but you learned that you were doing that wrong, then it's fine. If you say, hey, I took this feedback badly, but I learned that it was actually bad for me, and nowadays I take feedback gracefully. Like if you tell kind of a story like that, it should be fine. But I would usually avoid that telling a story that might backfire you, right? And another thing that's important is that you are honest, right? Because if you're not honest, chances are that it's gonna be really hard to deliver the answers, right? Because you might be caught by surprise. Like those questions are just examples, and they might give you other questions that you never thought about before. But you need to remember the principles. We will recap all of the principles here. But basically, you need to remember those things. Okay, another question they might ask you is, how do you study or approach learning something new? So basically, you need to tell them that you're consistent on your learnings, that you are strategic, that you know how to learn. Another question is, how do you handle a disagreement with a colleague who has a different opinion from yours? So basically here, you need to show them that you know how to reach to a middle ground. And why did you leave your current job? And just be honest. Just tell them, why did you leave? Or if you're currently working for the other company, just say, hey, okay, I'm currently working for the other company. And if they ask you, oh, why do you want to leave? You might say, oh, I want new challenges. I want bigger responsibility. I want to advance my career. Could be any of those reasons. And they might also ask you, why did you apply for this job? And, I could say something about that in that regard, like that you want new challenges. What is your purpose to be here? Advance your career could be a reasonable answer. What are you going to bring to this organization? And here, this question is very important that you study about the company's values, because if you don't know what are their problems, okay, you can give a generic answer that could work as well, but it would be a lot better if you can tailor your answer to the company's problems. And they might also ask you, is there anything you would like to tell us that we might not know about you? That's a tricky question. Obviously, you can't tell something that it would damage the interview. You have to say something that, is okay. It's okay to say that won't backfire you, right? So could be something funny. Could be, I dance. That's it. So that's something very simple, right? Oh, I dance. I like to dance. And then you might, make the conversation might become a little bit lighter. The interviewer might laugh a little bit, which is great, right? Because one of the good things, one of the key things when you are in an interview, I know this is very simple and you might say, hey, Rafael, really? But really, yeah, it makes a difference if you smile. It makes a difference because, people will like you. You'll be more likable. You'll be more charismatic, right? So simple thing as smiling, it helps a lot. And how do you say that your day was a success? So think about, the things that you truly consider success, right? That you generally consider success in your day. It could be, oh, today I was able to deliver my tasks. I was able to help a colleague. Today I fixed a bug. Today I was able to fix a problem that was impacting productivity for a long time. Could be those kind of things. How do you plan your work? And then you can say the way you plan your work. No tricks here. Any other projects you've worked on that would help you here. And then basically you connect all your previous experiences, everything you've done to the company's problems. So basically, yeah, like could be some curiosity about yourself, about this question here. And basically, your goal is to tailor the answer as much as possible to the company's problems, because this is what they want. They want someone to solve their problems. So if you can convey the message that, let's see here. Oh, and like we saw before, you can use the STAR method. Situation, task, action, result. Situation, task, action, result, right? So basically you have to tailor your answers where you convey that you show teamwork and collaboration, you're an easy person to work with, you are a good problem solver, you communicate effectively, you have leadership and initiative skills, you don't wait for others to tell you what to do, you adapt if you have to change tasks, you're going to figure it out, you're going to negotiate something, conflicts and challenges, you deal with conflicts in a mature way, you deliver results, and you communicate very transparently to management. Say, hey, I've been doing this, and you break down tasks. You make very transparent what you've been doing, because it's very important that you communicate clearly what you've been doing. Otherwise, if you don't, it's interesting but it's true. Even if you're the best developer in the world, but you don't communicate that clearly, people don't care, because if you are not able to communicate that clearly, you're not doing it. This is very interesting. That happens a lot. It happened in the previous company I was working for. This developer was doing his work, but because he wasn't able to communicate properly during the stand-up meetings, he was being interrogated every stand-up meeting. So why? Because his communication skills weren't good enough. So basically, if you're doing the work, but you're not able to communicate, it basically means that you're not doing the work. So basically, you need to tell the story in a way that, okay, you show to the interviewer that you know how to communicate effectively. Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Wellington, for providing the questions. Those are real world questions, so it's very good. Let me provide to you the form so that you can get the mind map. It's very important. Okay, let's see. And if you have any feedback for me to improve the weekly meetings, please let me know. Great. So that's pretty much it for today, guys. I appreciate that you are here, focusing on your career. And I'll see you on next Tuesday at 10 p.m. London time. Thank you so much, guys. And take care. Cheers.